Adore Life is the new record from the band Savages, released in 2016 on Matador Records. Hello, this is Track Lister, where we are going to tell you if each track on an album is good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. So this album really opens up with a bang with the song The Answer, and I would say that this is probably the best track on the album as well. It's somewhat repetitive, it uses the same guitar licks over and over again for the most part, and a very similar vocal pattern, but it is so powerful and so invigorating that it really doesn't matter. It's a great way to open up the album, gets you really excited to hear the rest of the album. Next we have Evil, which compared to the last track is much more varied in its use of guitar, much more melodic. One thing that occurs on this track, Evil, is that the rhythm section really stands out, and that's one thing I really do love about this album. You can really tell when they come in and they're very strong. You can notice the clear definition between the guitar and vocal section and then the drum and bass section are completely separate from that, and that's something that's really cool about this album. If I had to make a strike against this song, I would say that the hook is pretty bland, but still I'm going to definitely recommend this track. I'm going to say it's really good. Next up we have the track Sad Person, which is pretty similar to Evil in its vocal style and a lot of its instrumentation. It's different, there's more noise and feedback on this song, but it's too undistinguishable from Evil to really make a lasting impression on me, and that's why I'm going to say this one's a little more iffy. Even though I did enjoy it, it feels kind of repetitive after Evil in the way that the album is sequenced. Luckily, up next we have Adore, which is one of my favorite songs on the album. It is a slower song, but I think that really helps break up after the first three songs were all so hard-hitting. Similar to Sad Person, we have a lot of feedback in the guitars, which is always really good. I like that sound, and Savages does that really well. Eventually these feedback guitars are going to, at the very end of the song, this is my favorite part of the song, they kind of start low, and they build up and they build up along with that excellent drum section that I talked about earlier, and it comes to this great grand finale in the song, and you're going to see that a few times in this album, but I think it's the best done here. And it builds and builds and builds and builds, and then it's just really satisfying the way that it kind of comes to that conclusion, and it's real noisy, really satisfying because the rest of the song was real quiet, and then you do have this sort of crescendo at the end, which is really cool. Next up we have another iffy song. It's called Slowing Down the World. It's not especially interesting, especially in the hook section. It's not great. If I did have to say one good thing about it, I would say that I like that the use of high-pitched guitars in this song. The rest of the album this far has been very low, droning guitar, and this one is much higher, and that creates a really cool contrast between the high guitar and the low rhythm section that I've been talking about, which is an interesting dynamic. But unfortunately, the rest of the song, the vocal style, really bland, not really super interesting, and I would have to give this one a pass, but the instrumentation is good enough that I would still call it iffy. Next up on the album we have I Need Something New, which I was a little bit hesitant to give a pass because again I find much of this album, but especially on songs like this, that the vocal style is pretty simple. It's just kind of the lead singer just kind of yelling the title over and over, and not really even yelling. It's not even screaming, it's not invigorating in that way. It's just a little bit bland. The whole time you feel like they could be letting out more. Again, this song has a very strong bass line, much like all the other songs, but especially this one, you can really hear it. And I would also say this one is definitely worth listening to because, again, there's another really cool build-up at the end, and I think those tracks, this one and Adore, are really, really worth listening to because of that, mostly, because that's when this album is at its best, is when it's starting low like this, and then it moves up and it moves up, and it creates this crazy climax of all these drums and guitars just totally shredding out at the same time, and they're really, really, really great dynamic there. Next we have When in Love, and this starts a little bit minimalistic. It just has a basic guitar riff and a little bit of some drums, and it builds and builds a little bit. You also get on this track, once it does get into pace, real crushing heavy guitars, which are really nice. But again, I find the vocals pretty bland, uninteresting. I don't really have very much nice to say about them. They are, as I've said before, just kind of yelling the title a lot. Next we have kind of a change of pace in the album called Surrender, and this one's cool because you get this real low It's either a synthesizer or a fuzz guitar. I couldn't totally tell. It's and it gives you this crazy nice spot where you can layer the higher sounding synths and guitars that they use here on top of it. It's a really pleasing sound, and it creates a really good foundation for a song ahead. The guitar here has a lot of melody to it, and I thought that the fuzz slash melody guitar dynamic here really worked well. Next we have one of my favorite songs on the album called This Is What You Get. This one goes really fast. It's really, really cool. Where the rest of the albums have been pretty fast, this one is noticeably faster, and I think that creates a really, really good change of pace in an upward motion to the album. The rhythm section here again is fantastic. You have a prominent use of cymbals on the drums, and you have this quick bass line that just keeps, coming around, and it creates another great rhythm section for the song. You also have these feedback guitars that make really, really nice sounds, a lot of distortion on them. Closing off this album, and it is a pretty short album, only clocking in at 38 minutes, is a song called Mechanics, which is largely ambient. There's just kind of a lot of something of a wall of sound building in the background. Again, the vocals are pretty uninteresting. I didn't like them, but I did like the ambience in the background. And this thing is especially interesting when it does keep layering the instrumentation on over each other track. And when the vocals disappear, that is really when this thing is at its best. It does come to another satisfying conclusion, and I think it's a good closer for the album, but I do think that the album could have been longer. But at the same time, I definitely appreciate when an album is shorter, because I hate the filler tracks. I hate, when there's skits on when you look at rap albums. So I can definitely appreciate the fact that Savages would just give you this 38-minute record, and you can just enjoy it for what it is, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Rhythm and bass section, really, really great. Most of the instrumentation, really, really great. All the distortion and feedback on the guitars creating a cool noise effect, great. But the one thing that really brings this album down is these vocals. They are so boring. They are not reserved enough to be really melodic and cool, and they're not powerful enough to be exhilarating through screaming. They're just kind of somewhere in the middle, kind of yelling the title over and over again, and it's not really pleasing to the ear. Overall, I enjoyed Adore, and I think that it was a good album, but I'm going to be expecting more from the next Savages album because I think they really, really have some potential. I'm going to give Adore Life 7.8 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Tracklister Reviews. I'm going to leave you with my scorecard.